everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this morning's Protecting Michigan Kids listening session. I'm Senator Michael Weber. With me today is Senator Jim Runestad, Representatives Jamie Thompson, Mark Tisdel, and Tom Kuhn. On behalf of my colleagues, thank you to the families who have joined us today. It takes a lot of courage to step up and tell your stories, and we respect your courage. I want to specifically thank Michelle Massey Barnes from Advocates for Mental Health of Michigan Youth for her advocacy and working with my office. This is going to be a listening session, not the usual legislative committee hearing. We want to hear from you. You deserve to be heard. Our commitment is to listen and to do what we can as lawmakers to use the power of legislative oversight to improve our state's broken systems. Before we begin, some very brief background on why we're here today. For years, serious concerns have been mounting regarding state agencies charged with caring for vulnerable children and young people, specifically the Hawthorn Center and Child Protective Services. I'm disappointed that representatives from these facilities did not accept our invitation to be present with us here today, so that they could listen to these families' stories about how they could improve their service for our most vulnerable. But that won't stop us here today. The Hawthorn Center in Northville Township is Michigan's only state-run psychiatric hospital for minors. The center has been under growing scrutiny as at least 17 young patients have escaped the facility since 2020. Additionally, the facility is the subject of a lawsuit pending from an active shooter drill that took place there in December of 2022. We have heard from many concerned parents about the condition of Hawthorn, some of which have been kind enough to join us here today. We also have family members who have firsthand experience with Children's Protective Services. There has been a rash of media reports about failures at CPS, including a recent in-depth and heartbreaking investigative report published last month by the Detroit News. An alarming number of children that should be protected by CPS have been subjected to abuse, and a crushing number have died. The lawmakers here today feel strongly that we must do all that we can to fix these broken systems, and most importantly, help the most vulnerable among us, the children of our state. We hope this listening session is a step in that direction. Again, thank you to those who have bravely stepped forward today to share their stories. We know these are difficult experiences to share, but we believe your courageous testimony will set the stage for desperately needed improvements. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speakers, Amy and Jaden Carter, and if they can join us over here to share their story and their testimony, that would be great.
My name is Amy, and this is my son Jaden. First, I want to say thank you for having us today. Thank you for recognizing what a concern Hawthorn has been. The last time my son had visited Hawthorn, it took 8 months for him to get in. I had to reach out to politicians, and I had to get an attorney, and Dana Nestle's office ultimately got him a placement in there. I was very upset to find his experience there was very traumatic, and one of the issues was they had a unit that they hadn't used since the 1970s called St. Clair. That's what the name of the unit is, and they were doing renovations at the time. They had put in a new gym, new windows, they had redid the different units, they were working on the roof at that time, and they didn't know where to put these kids, so they had about 8 of the kids, I believe. Jaden can talk more about it. They put them in this unit that, like I said, hadn't been used, and they were woken up to moldy rainwater on their heads and on their bodies. Jaden was sleeping on a mat on the floor, and they were there for over a week, having to shower. He said the severely autistic kids, he felt real bad for them because they couldn't leave that unit the whole time. And it was very disheartening to hear that in December they announced that they were leveling Hawthorn. Why did my son and the other children have to go through that Why are they throwing in all this money in the last year if they're gonna level Hawthorn? They need to be putting that money into increasing the training of the staff members and creating a therapeutic environment. One thing my son brought up, he wasn't there when the active shooter drill happened, but he said, "Mom, why would they do an active shooter drill at a hospital, especially with those kids?" I'm thankful he wasn't there at the time, but it just, in my eyes, I believe the director makes like $250,000 a year. How did that happen on his watch? And hearing the stories from my son, I don't feel like they care about the children as much as they need to be. We do have solutions. My son had stayed at a place called Wedgwood Christian Facility, and their program was amazing. Jaden learned so much there. He felt safe in his environment, and their program was ideal. They currently don't take children like Jaden anymore. They're just strictly foster care, and I'm not sure. They changed their structure of it. But this is my son. I want to you guys hear from him.
Hi, my name is J.D. Carter, and when I was at Hawthorn Center, it was the most untherapeutic, stressful, painful environment I've ever been in. I felt so unsafe at that time of being there in my life. Between being in black mold, sleeping on the floor, and staff members every single day having to struggle. The staff members struggle just as much as the patients do. There's no communication whatsoever. As far as the gun drill goes, I was not there, but I'm thankful for that. They have done more of this in the past that you have not known. I have been woken up to a fire alarm drill in the middle of the winter, and one side of Hawthorn didn't even get up. They did not wake up the child, they did not wake up the children. They left them to sleep. The other side of Hawthorn all went outside like they were supposed to. But my question is, why are we doing this at 3 in the morning, not telling any of them? You know, that's my biggest issue is they are getting paid all this money, but really it's messed up because they don't tell the staff members what's going on. They don't help them out. They basically send them in there not knowing what to do, not the right training. I've seen kids get choked out. I've seen kids get their whole neck messed up. Me personally, every single day I was there, I was scared. I was scared of the staff members, I was scared for my peers, and I was just scared. And the staff has told me numerous times that the only reason that we're there is they're setting us up for prison or jail, getting us used to it. I've had over numerous staff members, and I'm sorry for you guys, I keep stuttering because I'm really nervous up here, but I've had numerous staff members tell me that I should file recipient rights because my rights are being violated. And the saddest thing about that is the only reason that these kids aren't filing recipient rights is because they don't know how to spell. They don't know how to write it down. And I have filed recipient rights numerous times. I've been choked out, had my face bashed into the ground by staff members, and nothing has ever happened. They have sat there and told me that my rights have not been violated, but I know in my heart that my rights have been violated. And every single day I think about this in my head. I have to relive these memories every single day. It was the most traumatic experience I've ever gone through in my life. I've stayed there over 300 days, and I've seen the significant changes that they have made. I don't understand why they keep making these changes. I don't understand what they think is going on, but I know one thing is they don't care about me or any of the other peers there. I'm gonna let my mom speak.
Well, yeah, no, we certainly appreciate that testimony. We're going to open it up to some member questions here. Representative Thompson. Just hit the button right there. Yep.
I want to be able to look at you. What was your first name again? Jaden. Jaden. Thank you, Jaden.
You're welcome.
Honey, you are so strong, and I know you get it from your mom. I can see it. You are so strong, and thank you so much for coming and speaking for other children. That is amazing. Don't you ever stop. Let me ask you, when these things were happening and you talk about being choked out or your face smashed or situations that you felt unsafe, did you ever go to any staff and say, call my mother? Have you talked to my mom? Do my parents know?
Yes, I have, and I've even had staff members say that this isn't right, what they're doing. But at the same time, like, they'll lie to my mom. They'll tell her everything's fine. I have told my mom, I used to call my mom in there and I used to say, Mom, you need to get me out of here. You need to get me out of here. I don't feel safe. And my mom thought I just wanted to go home. But in the long run of it, it's because I knew that they weren't taking care of everything. And even the situations that they put the staff members in, like, for instance, there were 16 kids on an 11-kid unit. It's a hallway. Their units are like hallways. And they only have like 3 or 4 staff members dealing with 16 kids. That's mind-blowing.
Now, when you would call, or he would call you, would anyone there at the facility say or make you believe that your child is just saying that because he wants to come home? Or are they saying, he's going to say X, Y, and Z, but don't worry, everything's fine. This is how you need to respond to him to reassure him he's safe. Was there anything that was said to you in that regard? Or were they understanding and listening to your concerns?
Well, the thing is this was his 3rd time there. The first time he went there, it was actually very decent. That was about 4 years ago, and there was a drastic change. All the way down to the food, the staff. Jaden seen a huge change in that last time he was there. We, like I said, fought 8 months to get him in, and a month in, they were ready to send him home. And then he was saying he wanted to come home. So I'm like, what is going on? Like, we waited 8 months. I am not going to spend the next year not getting anywhere, Like, Jaden needed he needs skills. He needs to be in a safe setting, and he needs to learn the skills that he's lacking. And so I was confused. I didn't know, that it was that he really truly didn't feel safe. And it wasn't until I seen that active shooter drill that it all kind of came rushing in. Wow, I should have got him out sooner.
Did anyone at the facility ever call you to update you on his care plan or safety plan, or what his plan of care was ever going to look like?
No, this last time I was really surprised. I read through my notes actually because I journal a lot, and he was only in there a month. We only had 1 meeting, and they had a discharge date for him. And I was like, whoa. Usually in the past, we would do several therapy sessions, and his therapist was really good. I did like him, Dr. Brian Peck. And then they would actually send him home for an overnight stay. Let's see how it goes. The transition home is so important. He actually stayed an extra 2 weeks, I think, this last time, so community mental health could get their stuff in order and the school could get their stuff in order, and it still failed. Community mental health ended up calling CPS on us 3 days after he got out of the facility. In the past, CPS almost forced me to sign my rights over. We've had a very traumatic experience. We've been dealing with CMH since he was 5 years old. And I'll just say, I feel like they do a decent job, but for, maybe 10%, I don't know, 15% that have extreme behaviors to where there's a point of visible breakdown in the family unit, there's abuse going on. We need more help, because our only option is Hawthorn or giving your rights up.
Yeah.
And that's wrong, because you already have a child that has extreme needs, and then to force them to go into an orphan stage and that the parents can't be a part of it and they get lost in the system, how is that okay?
It's not okay. Thank you.
I've got a question for Jaden, and I really appreciate you coming and being here today. In your time, your most recent time there, were there folks that did escape, and how, from somebody that was there, how do you think they did escape, and kind of some of the experiences that you saw there in terms of that?
Actually, I know 3 people that escaped while I was there. I've seen 2 of them jump the fence, and I've seen 1 person leave the door open to the courtyard, which is like right.
Would that be a staff person that would open?
Yes.
Keep the door open? Okay.
Yes. I feel like the main question on like asking, why are they escaping? Like, what are their reasons to escape? You know, maybe because they don't feel safe. Maybe it's because, you know, they kind of starve us in there. Maybe it's because they don't treat us like we're humans.
Yeah.
I've thought about it too, to be honest. It's almost like in your head, you're like, man, I feel better off not being here and trying to get out. But I knew deep in my heart that, you know, that's not what I'm going to do, because I'm not trying to make my life worse. Because I've seen people do that, and every single time they get the cops called on them, you can catch a charge from doing that, and they don't treat you good at all if you do that. They put so many restrictions. They treat you like, I don't know, they really trap you in there after the fact.
All right. And I know Representative Kuhn has a question too.
Thank you, Jaden, for being here. You've indicated that there were a lot of changes in your last stay there. Could you go into some detail? I know your mom mentioned food and stuff. Could you give us some detail about that?
How they treat us was very different, in the sense of like the punishment. Like, someone could get in a fight and they don't do anything. At the end of the day, like, the food was it was really bad, to be honest. The food was terrible. The conditions of like cleaning were very bad. Like, when I first walked into Hawthorn Center, the last time I was there, I was sleeping on the floor with a mattress on the ground next to a window. The understaffing, the over patients, just all around, it was changing for the worse. And if you would have asked me, you think something's gonna happen 6 months before the gun drill, I would have said probably. To be honest, it was kind of just leading up to it. There's been numerous amounts of times that they've, you know, done stuff without telling staff members. And I feel like the upper management should not be doing gun drills in the first place. It's not like we're doing gun drills at McLaren or Hurley. This is a psychiatric hospital. And the only reason that Hawthorn Center passes inspections every single time is because they know when they're coming. They literally tell them, hey, yo, we're gonna be here at this time and this time. So they have all the staff members get everything in shape. They have us clean it. They have us do all that stuff. When I was on that 1970s unit, I didn't walk in there with it being clean. I had to clean all of the dust off my bed, all of the dust off my windows. There was wet spots on the carpet. There was black mold in the air vents. And it makes me really sad, to be honest, because the autistic kids that were in there was no AC in 90-degree weather in black mold. I can't even imagine being in that unit for the whole time. Luckily, though, I had some good staff members that did not want to be on that unit and let us go outside for majority of the day and get us out of that unit. But really, the change, as far as it changes, it's always kind of been like that, but it's just those little things really add up. And then they just add up, and they keep making those changes, and it's like, when something bad happens, they want you to look away from it. They're like, all right, we're gonna make this change so this don't happen again, but we're gonna make it in such a restrictive way that it don't feel right. You feel trapped. I feel like they want me to feel trapped in there. I feel like they want me to not succeed. if they wanted me to succeed, I feel like they would work with me. I'm a very workable person. I want to get help. But the whole time I was in there, instead I got harassed for the medication I use. I got put on medication that made me gain 30 pounds in 1 month, and they didn't work with me.
Well, Amy and Jaden, we really appreciate you being here, and we really appreciate your testimony, and this is exactly why we're doing this today, so.
Yeah,
we
for
really
sure.
appreciate it. So,
I appreciate
thank you.
y'all for letting me talk.
Yeah, no problem. So next, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Molly Bonter. She is via Zoom here, and hopefully all the tech works and we can hear each other and go from there, so.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yep.
Okay. All right, so as you said, my name is Molly Bonter, and our family lives in Ottawa County. So we're across the state from Hawthorn. Our daughter is currently 14, and she's struggled with her mental health since October of 2020. She's been a patient at all different types of mental health facilities. She's had numerous stays in the ER, over 30 days each, waiting for an inpatient bed. She has spent time in inpatient. However, they no longer accept her due to her aggressive behavior. She's been spent 4 months at a residential facility in Georgia and most currently at Hawthorn. So since 2020, she spent over 80% of her life in a hospital setting. In order to get her admitted to Hawthorn, we had to advocate all the way up to the state level and get our representatives involved. Had we not been successful in getting her admitted to Hawthorn, there would have been no other option for her to be placed in a hospital setting, as she'd been denied from nearly every other facility in the state of Michigan. I have no doubt we would have lost her to suicide had she not been admitted to Hawthorn when she was. She spent 11 months at Hawthorn from March 2022 to January 2023, when they discharged her against our wishes. We knew she wasn't ready to come home and be safe. Despite us sending her treatment team a detailed email explaining all of our concerns, she was discharged January 29th, 2023. The only safety plan that was provided at discharge was a verbal recommendation that she have a cell phone she could use to contact a trusted family member when she was struggling. This is not a sufficient safety plan from someone who is in an almost constant state of mental health crisis. CMH and I pushed for a more thorough safety plan, but we were not provided for one. She was home for 11 days. I'm sorry, this is hard. She was home for 11 days before my husband caught her attempting to hang herself from her ceiling fan in her bedroom. When first responders arrived, she bragged to them and the ER staff that this was her plan prior to discharge. She was proud she tricked the doctors into discharging her home, even though she wasn't ready. Had Hawthorn taken our concerns seriously, my husband would not have been traumatized by finding his daughter blue in the face, nearly unconscious, hanging from her ceiling. While we worked with ER staff and community mental health to get her readmitted to Hawthorn, a supervisor from Ottawa CMH told us that people who are this determined to commit suicide will usually succeed. Are we supposed to quit fighting to save our daughter's life and give up because CMH states our daughter will eventually succeed regardless of what we do or the services they provide? Once we succeeded in getting her back to Hawthorn, we were told by the psychiatrist there, families like ours usually have 3 options. Their child's discharged with a safety plan, which they themselves failed to provide us at her last discharge. Parents temporarily terminate parental rights to get child admitted to the state residential facility, or permanently terminate our parental rights. We told the psychiatrist we had no plan to terminate our parental rights, and we will continue to advocate for treatment options that do not require our family to place our child back in foster care. We adopted her when she was 3. We shouldn't have to give up parental rights to get her the help she deserves. Despite us being very clear that termination is not an option for our family, as we will never give up on our daughter, the psychiatrist has on at least 3 different occasions told our daughter that upon discharge, she will most likely be transferred to a group home because home is not an option. Not only is this not true, it directly goes against any work we are doing with her therapy team to try to rebuild our relationship with our daughter. So according to CMH and Hawthorn, our only choices are to accept our child will succeed at suicide someday, or to abandon her and terminate our parental rights to get her the placement she needs in a residential facility. In either option, we lose our daughter. Both of these organizations should be working to facilitate a safe transition home for the children in their care and not pushing families to give up. While our child has been at Hawthorn since March of 2022, we've noted many areas that need improvement. Most notably to us is communication with staff, lack of adequate schooling, and the poorly executed move to Walter Reuther. The communication issue has been ongoing. We should get notified anytime there's an incident with our daughter. We have noted that the ongoing protocol seems to be to send us a letter in the mail stating they attempted to reach us, but were unsuccessful. However, in none of these instances did we have a missed phone call from them. More commonly, when the hospital staff does call, they don't call immediately after the incident. They wait until the next shift comes on. So when we ask questions to fully understand what happened, the person who is calling wasn't present at the incident, so they can't answer our questions. On more than one occasion, I've emailed her psychiatrist requesting information with a specific deadline for when I would like that information. However, I received no response and have to sometimes send up to 4 emails before receiving an answer. Since our daughter has been hospitalized the majority of the last 3 years, we've seen a drastic decline in her school performance. Before 2020, she was constantly at the top range of her academic testing for her age group. Currently, she isn't even performing at grade level. She should be entering 9th grade if she was at our local community school. However, she's testing at 6th grade levels for math and English. All children in Michigan are entitled to a proper education, even if they are hospitalized. We have been informed that schooling at Hawthorn is an ongoing issue. They don't have teachers, the teachers don't show up, and there isn't any actual instruction. The kids are given worksheets to work through on their own. With the number of online options available in Michigan for school, it seems there should be more options available for education in a hospital setting. With online options, the children could still receive age-appropriate instruction by accredited teachers with peers in the community while still in the hospital. We've not been able to get our daughter an IEP, even though she meets all requirements, because Hawthorn's educational director states they don't do that. And we would need to obtain that from her local school. However, she cannot stay in a community school long enough to obtain an IEP. An online option for school would allow children in a hospital setting to obtain the necessary IEP that would help to provide a smoother transition to a community school upon discharge, since specialized services could be in place prior to discharge, and they would not have to wait the extensive period of time it takes to get those in place. Lastly, the move to Walter Reuther that took place on June 28th has raised additional communication concerns. Overall, the move seems to have been done too quickly, and Walter Reuther was not prepared for their arrival. We have been informed that upon arrival at 9 a.m., the kids were placed in an activity room until their rooms were prepared. The rooms weren't available until 10 p.m. These children received their medications at 8 p.m., after which many head to bed. Our daughter informed us that after receiving her medication, she requested a blanket from staff, as did several other children, and they went to sleep on the floor until the rooms were available. In no environment should these children have been made to sleep on the floor. On the day of the move, we received an email from our daughter's therapist around 4 o'clock, telling us the move went smoothly and she was settling in. However, we were not informed the rooms weren't ready, nor that she had to sleep on the floor. When we questioned the therapist about the issues with the rooms, she stated some of the children napped on the floor while waiting for the rooms. I'm sorry, but laying it down at the usual time you go to bed is not a nap. They went to bed on the floor for the night and were awakened 2 hours later to move to their rooms. In addition to the living areas not being ready, there were no phones on the units, so we were not even provided a phone number to contact our daughter until July 11th, nearly 2 weeks after the move. We were not provided a mailing address to send letters or hygiene products. The only means we had to contact her for nearly 2 weeks was a therapist's email. The therapist was on vacation half that time, so we had no way to contact our daughter. Since she has been able to call us using a cell phone the staff has on the unit. School has been delayed and provided only half days because the school rooms aren't ready. They won't be ready until the end of July. We haven't been able to continue working with our family goals through family therapy because therapy rooms aren't available, also not predicted to be available until the end of July. The level of care that should be provided by Hawthorn Center is needed in the state of Michigan. However, many changes are needed so children who are at the highest risk can start receiving the care they deserve and the care that's required by law in Michigan. Thank you.
Wow, yeah, no, I appreciate that testimony, and you covered a lot of different topics, but very, very compelling testimony. I'm going to open it up to our members if they've got some questions. All right, Senator Runestad, we'll have to move that mic over here. So.
thank you for your testimony. That was very compelling. You had a lot of suggestions. If you brought those up to Hawthorn's, administrators, and how did that go if you did?
We have brought that up during our IPLS meetings with the staff. They typically tell us, oh, things are going to get better. We're working on things are changing. Especially with the move, it's, oh, well, the move is still in process. Well, the Walter Reuther should have been fully prepared before the children were moved at all. When we bring up things regarding therapy, oh, well, we're going to work on that. We'll get that done. There's always seems to be some sort of reason or explanation. When her therapy team has asked the psychiatrist to stop talking to our daughter about discharge, they have since assigned her to a new psychiatrist because the psychiatrist would not stop talking to our daughter about discharge. So we have seen that small improvement. At least we've had assigned different staff, but so it seems like whenever we bring it up, they have an excuse or a reason why things aren't changing, or that, oh, we're getting there. Well, we're getting there. It's a work in progress.
Do you think a lot of the problems result from lack of staffing?
Yes, I think many of the problems are lack of staffing. Lack of good staffing, the staffing that actually cares. My husband and I feel like some of the staff that is on the units that are supervising the kids, not necessarily the therapy teams, but the ones that are there day to day on the units with the kids, are basically babysitters. They don't actually have any therapeutic benefit to the kids. Something I didn't mention is, I was trying to kind of stay focused on a couple specific points, is my daughter's 14. They show her TV mature movies on the unit, the staff does. I think it's just a way for the staff to watch the movies they want to watch and to keep the kids busy. So they're watching horror movies, they're watching movies with suicidal ideation and things like that. And these children are already at risk. They shouldn't be provided those types of movies and that type of entertainment.
Is there any ombudsman or organization you can go to that oversees a facility like Hawthorn?
I have not. We filed a couple of recipient rights, but I haven't heard anything back.
To whom do those go, the recipient rights?
I have an email address for somebody at Hawthorn.
So it's the same people then?
It's the same people.
Always a problem when you're writing a complaint to the people who you're complaining about, that that's really going to make a big difference. Well, it sounds like there's a lot that needs to be done. I think it sounds like there's funding issues. We just blew through $82 billion, the biggest record budget in the whole state of Michigan. Every kind of special goodie you could shake a stick at. And then I constantly hear these issues with government agencies, which are health and safety issues, which is job one of the government, failing to pay people properly, failing to do staffing properly, but bazillions of dollars for every goodie that has nothing to do with the core of government. So hopefully out of this something does improve. Thank you so much for your testimony.
You're welcome. And regarding funding, we've gotten a bill. We've gotten a bill, granted it was paid through Medicaid and things like that she has through her adoption subsidy. But we've gotten a bill from Hawthorn for her time there. They're charging over $2,000 a day for room and board.
Oh, unbelievable.
Yeah. We have a question too from Representative Tisdel.
Ms. Bonter and Ms. Carter, thank you both for coming up. But you each brought up a question that I need some additional clarification on or better understanding on. You each brought up the issue of forfeiting your parental rights. And I guess my question is, are there, in order to get additional benefits or some benefits that you need, intact families are at a disadvantage? Yes. So it's better off if you forfeit your parental rights. Is this something that I'm just learning about, or? Could one of you please provide some additional insight or detail on this?
I will say it's not just the Hawthorn staff that has told us this. We have heard this from CNH. We have heard this from the ER staff. We have heard this numerous times from Hawthorn. We have heard this from so many different people that that the only way to get our child into a residential facility or any other care other than Hawthorn is to terminate our parental rights, because wards of the state get primary admittance into these facilities.
Yes, your name?
Hi, I'm Michelle Massey Barnes. I am a co-founder of Advocates for Mental Health of My Youth, and we are a grassroots parent organization focused on these issues. So this is the problem that our families are facing. It's a funding stream problem. It's not a medical necessity problem. Michigan has not yet had psychiatric residential facilities set up for youth. So in order to get funding for a residential placement, you have to access those facilities either through the foster care system, which means you terminate your parental rights, or you access a placement through a court-ordered treatment, which means you criminalize your children. So we surveyed 50 parents, and 66% of our parents within a 48-hour time frame said that they were either directly or indirectly told to get the help that they need, they should terminate rights or have their children arrested. There's a spoiler alert here. Even if you do those things, you aren't going to necessarily get the help that you need for your children, because there's no placements for those kids either. We were just told by someone at the state of Michigan, there's over 130 children in the foster care system that need psychiatric residential placement, and they have no beds, so they're being housed in foster care homes. This is not treatment. But my question is, this is big and this is confusing and high level, but there is a federally required benefit called early periodic screening, diagnosis, and treatment. It states that all children under the age of 21 must receive medically necessary services. We can't even find the application. It's not on the state's website, we've called, we can't even find the form, because part of that requirement is even if a service is not included in the state plan, if it is medically necessary and it is a Medicaid benefit, the state must provide it. MDHHS told us it's very gray. They don't know if they can provide psychiatric residential treatment, but they have started a new program that they're starting to pay for psychiatric residential treatment with grant funding, with like general grant dollars, general fund. So it seems like we're starting to get some recognition that this level of care is needed, but every week we have one or more parents messaging our group and saying, I'm being told to terminate my parental rights to get treatment, or I'm being told to criminalize my children to get treatment. And then if you can't get the treatment that you need, and you say, I can't bring this child home because I have other kids in my home, and if this child hurts my other children, I'm going to be charged with neglect and abuse for failing to protect my other kids. If you don't bring that child home, you're charged with medical abandonment, which is abuse and neglect. And I can promise you one thing, as soon as CPS is involved, you are a bad parent. And it is your fault, it is your doing that you don't have the help that you need, and you're a bad parent, and we aren't sure that you even deserve it. That is what we are facing. That is the toxic culture that we are facing as parents in Michigan.
If I may, it just seems like kind of a perverse incentive or a perversely designed system, and so you wonder, so who benefits from this? Who benefits from having the kids abandoned? Who benefits from having your children arrested in order to keep you out of the can of worms that we've just opened up here, where if you try to do it yourself, you bring them home and there's a problem, then CPS is called as well.
Well, I don't know who benefits, but it's sure not the families. Yeah. I can tell you that when children enter the foster care system or the juvenile justice system, they're no longer being served by the community mental health bucket of funds. And so we have these kids being passed from system to system to system. Idaho went through this years ago, and they rewrote their entire children's mental health code, and one of the first things in that code states that the department is responsible for all medical necessary care for its children. And that stopped this, it's called custody relinquishment. That's what we want. We want a custody relinquishment law so that when families need 24-hour or out-of-home placement for their kids, CPS cannot be involved unless there is actual abuse and neglect, not parents begging for help that they can't get.
Thank you for jumping into
I'll
the
sit down.
frame
No,
there.
no, thank you. So again, we appreciate Ms. Bonter testimony. Now we would like to call up Natalie Anwar to provide her story and her testimony.
Good morning. Thank you for having this session, and I apologize right now that my case is complex. And there's a lot of details, and I'm hoping that you can follow. And I'm feeling emotional because there's some things that the previous parents have said that I didn't know was happening to other people besides my children. And which makes me even more anxious because I currently have 2 children at Walter Reuther right now. Okay, so I have 5 sons. My oldest is 22, he's out of the house. My youngest is 14 and in the home. I have, as I stated, I have a set of identical triplets. They are 16 years old, and all 3 of them have autism. 2 of my triplets, as I said, are currently at Walter Reuther, which before they were admitted to Hawthorn on April the 27th. It was supposed to be a pit stop before being able to be placed at Great Lakes Center, it was an autism treatment facility in Portage. On the 16th of June, Great Lakes came to visit my sons at the hospital because they were getting ready to have some beds become available. On the 21st, Great Lakes sent a letter to CMH denying my children placement for the following reasons. The youth does not currently have a successful medication regime and is requiring additional PRNs at the center. When the youth is in crisis, it takes between 6 to 8 staff members to manage the situation, which usually is happening, which these situations are happening at least once a week. That was for Aiden. For Jaden's denial, the youth does not currently have a successful medication regime, requiring additional PRNs. When he's in crisis, it takes multiple staff members to manage the situation, which is happening at least once a week. The youth has significant food selectivity concerns that may require further medical evaluation. The youth is currently receiving 2-to-1 staffing. For those reasons, Great Lakes stated that the youth in question will not be considered for placement in the intensive residential program, ever. Great Lakes was my only hope of being able to keep my children in state following their psychiatric hospitalization. Every other place now that I have to look, they're out of the state. Kennedy Krieger, Maryland, a facility in South Carolina, possibly a facility in Connecticut. The 2 outside of Kennedy Krieger, it's questionable still because that my children still have to meet criteria. But again, Great Lakes was my only chance of being able to keep my children in the state where I can participate in their therapy and check in on them to make sure that they are safe. Aiden had a successful medication regime at home prior to being admitted to Hawthorn. My use of PRNs was limited. His triggers were generally due to his siblings, and him not being able to be removed from the environment due to my lack of staff. I only generally had 2 people to manage 3 teenage boys. My boys are 6 feet tall. And at that time, roughly 175 to 180 pounds. Still, we were able to manage Aiden at home with 2 people, and that is without having a safe space for him to work through his outbursts. No padded rooms in the rental where I live. Jaden had a successful medication regime prior to being admitted to Hawthorn. His trigger was being redirected when he tried to run to Walmart, which was walking distance from my home. A placement at Great Lakes, he would not have had knowledge of where to access a Walmart. They would have managed his behavior because they have therapists. He wouldn't be triggered by his sibling because they would be able to keep him separated. And I'm gonna skip down. Hawthorn staff have placed my son Jaden in restraints every time he went to pick his head. He's got a wound on his head that wasn't healing because of him picking it. But then there was a period of time when it started to heal, and that was when my son Aiden was in the local hospital for a period of 30 days, waiting for temporary psychiatric placement. At that time, and that was in December the 10th to January the 9th, they kept saying that Hawthorn did not have any beds. Harbor Oaks didn't have any beds. There was no facility in the state that had any beds. And then they drugged him up and they sent him home. During that time, Jaden continued to pick his head. So that I'm saying that because half of the restraints that Jaden was going through was because they would prevent him from picking his head, which is a really cruel way. But if they had therapists that would work with him, they would be able to use positive behavior supports to get him from doing that. Prior to going to Hawthorn, my son Jaden has, both of them, they had about 6 hours of therapy a day. The ABA services were terminated in January when Aiden was discharged home. So from January until April, my sons did not have any therapeutic services. That's important because when CMH approached me to letting me know that there were beds available at Hawthorn, the selling point was that your children would be able to have therapeutic services and be able to go to school. Jaden ate more food at home. There was a variety of things that he ate. At Hawthorn, up until 2 days ago, I was told that the only thing that he was eating was Pop-Tarts. My son has lost 30 pounds since April the 27th. That's a significant amount. It looks like he's wasting away. He doesn't have much fight anymore, and that could be because he doesn't have the strength or the energy because he is hungry. And so the Jaden here, this Jaden validating the concern that children are going hungry. I told the doctors at their intake to watch for rapid weight loss because this is what happened the last time my sons were at Hawthorn. They were admitted in March of 2021 and discharged in June. And during that time, it was also traumatic. Every visit since Jaden's admittance, I have commented about him losing weight and asked for his weight to be reported. It shouldn't take Dr. Mellows to say something to Hawthorn staff to see and do what it's obvious they needed to do. Aiden and Jaden have PTSD from the previous day. That would certainly fuel their anxiety even more for having to return. Hawthorn should have prepared for this. Many of the staff were familiar with my sons. Still, there was no pairing done with Hawthorn staff to help form and maintain rapport with my sons during this admission. I admitted Jaden to Hawthorn for no other reason than I could not keep him safe. He was placing himself and staff in danger trying to cross Grand River, which is a busy street. I'm sure it's busy, wherever city that you're in, because it goes across the state. Local first responders could not continue to respond to our 911 calls when he would dart into the street trying to go to Walmart. I had made, from my home, 80 calls to 911 from January 1st to April the 27th. 80 calls. Before, and Jaden had been taken to the local hospital 50 times from January 1st to April 27th because they could not be admitted to Hawthorn because I was told they did not accept children with developmental disabilities. The police and local fire department, they wrote letters to the state requesting help for my family. I also was able to garner the support of Representative Julie Brixey, who organized a meeting between MDHHS leadership, CEI-CMH, CPS, which had been called on me 26 times in the last year and a half for me taking my son to the hospital when he would run out to the street because he was too aggressive to be redirected home. They opened 6 cases and then they closed 6 cases. 6 cases were open, 6 cases were denied, but constantly being reported to CPS for trying to get my son's help. When Aiden was brought home, I stabilized him myself. I did not feel he needed to be admitted in April because he was already baseline. For the first 3 weeks, he was still baseline. And then even the doctors had reported, why is he here? He's doing amazing. After those 3 weeks, something happened. It changed overnight. Now my son Aiden has been in restraints since April 27th, over 50 times. There's a law about restraints and the damage that it causes. My sons, and the use of restraints, they're treated like animals. And if you're gonna treat them like an animal, they're gonna behave like an animal. I'm still waiting for an update on the recipient rights. I can file recipient rights complaint that I filed in June for the marks that was found, I found on my son Aiden's neck. A bruise above his eye and Jaden a busted lip. This was all in the same day. When I asked about it that day when I saw it, because I visited every week on Friday, the marks were fresh. I said, what is this on my son's neck? The therapist comes and she looks at it, I don't know. How do you not know? Well, can you find somebody who could tell me what happened? The nurses didn't know. The staff didn't know. I felt forced to admit Aiden to Hawthorn because I was afraid that CMH would not help me obtain residential placement with Great Lakes. Not only has he been denied for Great Lakes, he is now far too aggressive and angry with me to even return home. Not this visit that I had yesterday, I was able to spend about 20 minutes before he tried to raise a cup and throw it at me. The previous 2 visits, my son attacked me. That's not something that he had done any other visits before. And when I would visit, he would look at me and cry and say, let's go home. My sons are nonverbal for the most part. They can't tell me anything what's happening to them. They can't express to the staff what they're feeling, if anyone is bothering them or hurting them or harming them. They can't say, this person, Mom, this person hurt me. They don't have that ability. So I only know by their behavior. Like I said, I would have never consented to send Aiden to Hawthorn had I known subjecting him to such an aversive environment wasn't going to yield the results that CMH led me to believe. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forward, is what was said to me. This is so far backwards, I don't know how we will go forward. If it weren't for the fact that my landlord tried to put me out of my home due to the number of times that 911 had to be called because I couldn't get them placement, and had I known that Jaden would deteriorate to the level that he has, that is losing weight so rapidly and looking so frail that he looks like the character from Stephen King's Thinner, I would not have sent him either. We had a follow-up meeting, today is Friday? What is today? Today is Friday. This past Tuesday, July 11th, Representative Julie Brixey and her Chief of Staff, Rachel Chacon, MDHS heads again, CMH and Hawthorn administration, including Dr. Mellows, who is the Deputy Director for the State Hospital's admission at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, to discuss my concerns. This is how egregious the situation with my sons have become. Dr. Mellows, head of state psychiatry, led the meeting. It should not take the head of psychiatry to tell the state-run hospital how to care for its patients. It should not take me having to call Representative Brixey every time we are in crisis to get these agencies to do their job. And it should not take me driving 180 miles, 4 hours, to come to this meeting to share my story, which triggers my PTSD every time I have to tell it. These things should not have to be done for something to actually happen that changes what is happening with our children with mental health issues. What my children have gone through and are going through currently, what this has put my family through. Every morning when I wake up, every night when I'm still, I'm crying for my sons. How could anyone see that this is okay? That's all I have.
It's not okay, and that's why we're doing this listening session. That's why we're trying to make some change here. We're going to open it up to. Do you have a question, Representative Thompson?
I'm a mother and a grandmother, and my heart breaks for you. Senator Weber is absolutely accurate. This is not okay, and this has to stop, and this has to stop now. And thank you so much for making this trip to tell your story. Thank you. Going back just a couple questions, I'm not as familiar with the Great Lakes
Autism and
placement.
Treatment
Okay.
Research Center.
My first question would be, how do they advertise themselves as what their ability to care for autistic children are? And then something else that, I'm a nurse, and I was listening to you say that their medication regimen at home, they were stable, you didn't have to do as many PRN medications as the facility is saying. When they were transferred, when you had admitted them to Hawthorn, did anyone call you to do any type of medication transcription, go over meds that they were on? If the medication were changed, did they let you know? Did you have any input on it? Kind of hearing the way that they're acting, I know a new facility, a new environment may cause some additional anxiety, but if you had them stable at home with medication, I'm curious to hear if they had changed it or if it wasn't being given at the same time. And you as the mother being involved in knowing, because you were caring for them prior, what that looked like. And then with this Great Lakes, I don't like the fact that they are advertising as a facility for autistic children, and then they're telling you that your child is too emotionally disturbed to get care there. So are they advertising? How are they advertising?
I'm not sure exactly how they advertise.
Okay.
I've been in contact with Great Lakes since 2021. That was when my son Aiden was placed on the list for residential treatment. During the time that we were waiting for that to happen, we secured another ABA provider, and they were able to do the therapy in a lesser restrictive environment at home. And so we were tabling him going to Great Lakes for until we saw that would be necessary, because again, we were able to do the things at home, which is where I want them. I want them at home.
course.
When they went this year, at the beginning of the year, they were placed back on the list. And this was something that was worked out with CMH. And at that point, they said, 6 months to 9 months, maybe by late fall, they might get in. Then when they were sent to Hawthorn, I was told that they would probably get in before they would have to be moved from Hawthorn to Walter Reuther.
So they're using Walter Reuther as like a transitional facility for when children need to be moved, or if they're doing any type of construction at Hawthorn, that Walter Reuther seems to be the only facility that they can temporarily place children.
Yes,
Okay.
that was the only facility that was available. The only facility, again, I'm not even sure, I was told that they didn't accept children with developmental disabilities anymore, but then they did. So, I'm sure it was because the police officers and the fire department making those phone calls stating that they could not continue to come out to my home. 80 times is quite excessive. And so they did this, but yet I only wanted one bed, but they offered me 2. Again, that's why I said I didn't feel like one of them needed it as much because we were able to maintain. The other question you asked me.
The medication.
The medications,
Yeah.
Okay. On intake, they asked me all the medications. I gave them all the medications. They told me some of the medications, they might try them, that they would try if things weren't working out. And they gave me a list of them. But however, I found out that upon Aiden's admission, they had started putting him on lithium. And I said, well, why are you putting him on lithium if he hasn't even had a behavior? So they started medicating him extra upon his arrival. And my son Jaden, who was having behaviors upon his arrival, they weren't putting him on enough because he was really combative when he got there. He did not want to be there. Right now, my sons, they're changing the medications again. This is as of this week. But my point in saying that is that from April the 27th to June the 16th, that they still didn't have stable medication. You still couldn't figure out what to do.
That's not acceptable.
No. And the fact that they come in and they see them in that state, and I know that aggression level, they have an aggression threshold. They can't always provide 2-to-1 staffing, and they don't use restraints. So that's part of the reason why they can no longer be taken.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. All right, next we are going to have Jeremy Hoyer via Zoom provide some testimony as it relates to CPS.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start, I just want to disclose that I am in uniform. I'm a forward deployed service member right now, so anything I state does not represent the federal government. My stuff began back in May of 2017. To be exact, May 21st of 2017 with CPS. After my middle-aged daughter was seriously injured, where she allegedly was bitten by a dog. That picture I'm in receipt of, and I think some of you are in receipt of it as well. It is appalling to me. It shows that there is an issue. It is not a dog bite. It's not a dog bite. It's blunt force trauma brought on by negligence. When I attempted to file things through CPS, they never investigated it. To this day, it's still not investigated. I've had numerous issues with CPS since that very date. It has caused my post-traumatic stress disorder, my combat-related post-traumatic stress disorder, to turn into complex-related post-traumatic stress disorder from emotional trauma, from the children's stuff. This system that is in place that CPS uses is a complete and utter failure. It is a waste to the taxpayers of Michigan. And quite frankly, they are defrauding the taxpayers of that state. I'm really concerned with the precedent that is set by the courts and those that are involved in this process. If you would allow me, I'm going to allude you to the Gabriel Hernandez case in California, where the district attorney actually brought 4 social workers on criminal charges in derelictions of their duty, and Gabriel Hernandez was killed by his mother after 22 CPS allegations went unfounded. 22 CPS allegations. More recently, a case in Sarasota, Florida, where a young daughter was pulled from their mother's care. 6 months later, that mother hung herself in her garage. She killed herself because of failure of a system. You, as our lawmakers, have the ability to change this. And I ask you to do so. This must change. This must. How do we go about it? We have to hold those that are entrusted with the vulnerable to the standards of which our children are held. They are vulnerable human beings. And in some sense, I think our children are being used as pawns, just as children are used as sex slaves. That's abrasive, but if you think about it, it's defrauding the state. This is an atrocity beyond imagination. Parental rights are protected by the Constitution under the Fifth Amendment. Each state has the right to delineate what their parental rights are foreseen. But I am deeply concerned. And I respectfully plead with each of you, this isn't, I ask you to do what is right, do what is morally and ethically correct. Just do our jobs, because for me, my job was not on the line for the last 20 years of my life. It was my life that was on the line through multiple combat deployments. I've done my time. I've done my time. I ask you, and I respectfully plead that you do your same. This has got to stop, and it stops in the legislative body that sits before me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer. Thanks for your testimony. I will open it up to member questions or Senator Runestad.
Thank you for your testimony. Just curious, was that the only complaint you had with CPS? Was that one, or was there multiple complaints that you made?
Senator, I have multiple complaints. And again, I'm on the move right now. I'm down in South America. I don't have things in front of me to pull that stuff up because of my bandwidth down here and security restrictions with the IP addresses that I'm using. So I'm very limited on what I can pull up and allude to, because I don't want to say anything on the record that's not factual. There's multiple things. I'm actually working with the second in charge in Kent County CPS right now. As a matter of fact, there was a more recent incident where Kent County Sheriff was involved, where my 2 youngest daughters were basically abandoned. They were abandoned for about 2 hours in the residence of them by themselves. 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. Without the supervision of an adult there, and through that weekend, for starters, their young puppy ate a box of rat poison that was left on the ground. So this 8- and 6-year-old girl sat there and watched their dog struggle as they were dying. As they were dying. And then, at the direction of their biological mother, the babysitter left. And they were literally left at home for 2 hours by themselves. I became aware of this. I immediately notified CPS as well as Kent County Sheriff. Kent County Sheriffs went over there and did a full investigation. The detective that was assigned to the case actually filed child abandonment charges in the 4th degree. Well, the DA denied the charges pending the investigation of CPS. Well, guess what CPS hasn't done? It's 6 months later. I'd hate to say if one of my kids were to die, because that's where this is going. That's exactly where this is going. And at which point, go ahead, Senator, I'm sorry.
I was just, when wanted clarification if there were other instances where CPS didn't follow through.
That's one of many. To be honest with you, I think there's about 46 to 47 CPS cases, to be honest with you, that have gone unfounded. And it is a complete pattern of negligence, malice, and abandonment.
Thank you.
Further, Representative Thompson with a question.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I am curious to get your thoughts. Do you feel that the staff that works for CPS is being properly trained to handle the cases that they have? Do you feel it's negligence on their part, or do you believe that there is policies and procedures within the department and within legislation that are tying their hands and causing them the inability to be effective with hearing these cases and looking into these cases?
I do think training does play effect, but I also think their life experiences has a huge role in it as well. You know, social workers are very, the younger social workers tend to be very ignorant in their thought process, and they go by the laws which are set, which they can go by. But I do think there's a level of ignorance, and I do think, quite frankly, there should be a screening process when hiring these people. Because I think what you're historically seeing through this pattern is you're seeing social workers being hired who have experienced them themselves. Typically, you get into a career field where you want to make changes from a childhood. So they're left with their own emotional trauma and have never processed that. And that bleeds into their work. That is exactly, I think, what I'm seeing. And the question remains is, how do you fix that? I don't know.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for coming on, being in South America. It's very much appreciated, so thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, very good. All right, thank you so much. So now we are going to have our last speaker, Heather Werner, also joining us via Zoom to talk about CPS.
Hi, how are you guys?
Hello.
So I have a 7, he's now 7. My ex, we've had to deal with CPS since my son was 16 months old. My ex is not a good person. In 1 year alone, 65 CPS cases were filed against him. He at one point did lose his parental rights because of CPS issues. My son was injured by my ex's mother. He was thrown on the ground repeatedly. CPS had submitted letters to terminate his parental rights, but in Macomb County, the court system, they didn't do that. So he did lose his rights for about 2 years, but they've now reinstated his rights. My son, since he's 16 months old, has witnessed abuse from his dad, verbal, mental, physical, against his stepmother. He does not know how to parent. It is so neglectful. He's threatened CPS caseworkers multiple times. They don't even come to the house anymore. They won't go. They just look at it, review it, and then pass it off as it's no big deal. We've gone from domestic violence that they've seen, child abuse, sexual abuse, anything you can imagine, and CPS just turns a blind eye. The last case that we had, because my ex burned my son with a cigarette, but because my son didn't remember to say the exact words, CPS wanted to charge me with failure to protect my son. So we've had a long issues. We've had a lot to deal with CPS. I do not feel that they are equipped to handle anything anymore. It's just every day it's something new. But that's my story with them.
Okay, no, we appreciate that. We appreciate you being part of this. We'll open up to member questions, comments. Very good. We appreciate your testimony, and we appreciate you being a part of this today. So I think we're gonna start to kind of wrap up. Thank you again to all that joined us here today. I really do appreciate Jason Dale and his team, Rochester Hills City officials and staff, for allowing us to use this wonderful facility, but also all the work on the tech to make sure everybody could be seen and heard for this vital listening session this morning. Thank you too to my fellow state legislators, Senator Runestad, Representatives Thompson, Tisdel, and Kuhn, who were here to listen to the stories and share that were shared today. But most of all, thank you to all who shared your personal stories and experiences with us. Your testimony helps us in the work ahead, but most of all, it will help future young people who need the vital care and resources these agencies are meant to provide. We have a duty to these families to ensure state officials are held accountable and restore confidence for our residents. I believe it is imperative that the state's Office of the Auditor General investigate the Hawthorn Center in order for us to have a fuller picture of the institution's failings, and I, along with the lawmakers here, will formally request that Auditor General report this week. I also will work with state lawmakers to help solve more obvious concerns. We can and will do better for these vulnerable young people in the state's care of the Hawthorn Center. We all know that time is precious in these situations, and enough time has been wasted by these state agencies in Lansing. Thank you again to everybody that's been with us here today, and we appreciate your time. Thanks.